The stadium wasn't ready for what was coming. Nobody was. Not the fans, not the commentators, not even the hitters who had studied Shohei Ohtani for years. Because on this night, he walked onto the mound carrying something different in his eyes, something colder, sharper, almost dangerous. It began with silence. A silence so heavy you could hear the faint hum of the stadium lights vibrating above the field. Ohtani stood at the rubber, gripping the ball not like a pitcher, but like someone holding back a storm. The first pitch left his hand with a sound that did not belong in baseball. A violent crack of air tearing apart, 165 kilometers per hour flashing on the screen. Fans didn't even cheer at first. They just gasped. Hitters stepped out of the box. Umpires adjusted their masks like they weren't sure what they'd just seen. Even Ohtani himself didn't react. No fist pump. No smile. Just the same icy stare back into the catcher's glove. Then came pitch 2. Louder. Faster. Another 165 kilometers per hour. People rose to their feet not because they wanted to, but because their bodies couldn't stay seated after witnessing something that felt almost supernatural. The camera zoomed in on his face, sweetless, unshaken, locked in. This wasn't just a pitcher throwing hard. This was a man slipping into a different dimension, where the limits of the human body stop mattering. Coaches exchanged looks like they were watching history rewrite itself in real time. Analysts scrambled through their notes, looking for any precedent, any statistic, any explanation. There was none. The hitters were frozen, standing in the box like statues carved from disbelief. They weren't trying to hit the ball anymore. They were trying to survive it. Ohtani exhaled, slow and controlled, like a warrior steadying his heartbeat before the next clash. He wound up again. The crowd leaned forward. Time seemed to slow. The third pitch came out even cleaner, even smoother, and somehow even faster. The moment the catcher's glove popped, half the stadium screamed, half covered their mouths, and the scoreboard glowed like an alarm. 165 kilometers per hour, again. Something electric pulsed through the air, the kind of energy that makes even strangers grab each other's shoulders in disbelief. Commentators, voices cracked, unable to keep up with the surges of emotion. They tried to speak but kept laughing, shouting, then going silent as if their minds couldn't form words anymore. Ohtani didn't just dominate the inning, he erased it. 3 batters, 3 swings that never connected, 3 looks of complete helplessness as they walked back to the dugout. The replay angles made it look even more unreal, the seams of the baseball vibrating like a blur, the catcher stumbling back from the impact, dust shooting up from the mound as Ohtani drove power into every step of his delivery. Fans outside the stadium heard the roar and rushed inside, sprinting down ramps trying to catch a glimpse before the miracle vanished. And just when everyone thought the moment had peaked, he did it again. Another inning. Another fastball touching impossible numbers. This time, hitters didn't even pretend. They shook their heads, tapped their helmets, muttered to themselves like men having existential crises in real time. Ohtani's teammates watched from the dugout, their faces a mix of awe and fear, the kind of fear you feel when someone does something you didn't think a human could do. Every pitch became a pulse in the stadium's heartbeat. Every release was followed by the same haunting hush. Every reaction from the crowd rippled like thunder rolling across the seats. Ohtani was no longer pitching, he was unleashing something ancient, something that made baseball feel more like a legend being written under the floodlights. The opposing manager stood on the top step of the dugout, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, knowing there was no strategy, no adjustment, no plan B for this. You can't game plan against a force of nature. The catcher signaled, almost trembling now, because catching these pitches wasn't just a job anymore, it was an act of trust. Ohtani lifted his leg. The stadium inhaled. He delivered. Another 165 kilometers per hour, but this one had something extra, some twist of wicked life that made the ball jump like it was dodging gravity. The batter swung through it so hard he spun himself nearly off his feet. The crowd exploded, not in cheer, but in a wild, chaotic roar, the sound of thousands of people realizing they had just witnessed something that would be replayed for decades. Even the commentators stopped trying to analyze and simply surrendered to the moment, letting raw emotion take over. Ohtani stepped off the mound for a second, adjusting his cap, looking almost confused, like a man waking up from a trance and only half aware of the destruction he had just unleashed. He looked to the outfield, then to the sky above the stadium, as if silently asking himself how far his limits truly go. The inning ended in a blur of strikeouts, broken bats, and hitters walking away with their helmets dangling in their hands like defeated soldiers. As he walked back to the dugout, fans bowed, clapped, screamed, cried, some even recording with shaking hands because they knew, deep down, that tonight would be talked about long after they were gone. Ohtani didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded once, a tiny, humble acknowledgement that the impossible had happened, again. But the night wasn't over. The dugout whispered. Cameras followed his every step. His name trended worldwide before he even sat down on the bench. People at home stared at their screens, replaying the pitch speeds, shouting for their friends to come watch. Clips spread across social media like wildfire, tagged with words like unreal, inhuman, historic. Children in the stands watched with their mouths open, seeing the moment that would inspire them to pick up a baseball tomorrow. Veteran pitchers watching from the bullpen shook their heads slowly, knowing that this wasn't just talent, this was evolution. And as Ohtani rose again for his next inning, the stadium shook with anticipation. Not fear, not excitement, something deeper, something spiritual. He took the mound one more time, standing beneath the lights like a figure carved into destiny itself. The crowd began chanting his name, not fast, but slow, like a drumbeat rising from the earth. Shohei, Shohei, Shohei. He set his stance. He locked in. He released one final pitch, a pitch that didn't just cross the plate, it carved its own place in baseball history. The glove popped. The crowd erupted. And the scoreboard flashed that magic number one last time. 165 kilometers per hour. 3 digits that told the entire story of a man who refuses to accept the limits the world sets for him. As Ohtani walked off the field, the cameras stayed on him, capturing the image that would be remembered forever, a quiet, calm warrior leaving behind a night no one would ever forget. And somewhere in the stands, a young kid holding a glove whispered to himself, if that's possible, maybe anything is. And maybe that's the real magic of Shohei Ohtani. Not just the power, not just the speed, but the belief he leaves behind in everyone who watches him, that greatness is not a moment. It is a choice he makes every time he steps onto the field. Tonight, he didn't just pitch. He inspired, he transformed, he reminded the world that legends aren't born. They are made, pitch by impossible. Pitch.